What was the creepiest or most paranormal thing that's ever happened to you? One afternoon in college I came back from classes and decided to sit on the couch and have a snack. After that I just passed out. I had a nightmare of some bloody-faced demonish thing screaming in my ear at the top of its lungs. Woke up and went about the rest of my day. My roommate comes back later that night and goes into his room as I'm sitting in the main living area. At some point he lets out this random startled scream which leads to me running down the hall to see what's going on. He looks at me and goes, "I swear to God someone with a bloody face just walked from your bedroom into the bathroom." I never told him about my nightmare I had earlier in the day. I didn't sleep for 2 days. Nothing ever happened again. When I was in college I house sat for my parents. I'm a bit of a scaredy cat, so I locked every door leading up to the bedroom when I went to bed at night. I had the weirdest dream that someone unlocked each door and turned on every light. I felt cold and woke up to my dog barking. All of the lights in the house were on and every door open and unlocked. My dog wouldn't stop barking at nothing in the hallway. I sat in the shower with my dog and a phone the rest of night scared to death. Not paranormal but definitely creeped me out. I was walking home one evening and was up the road from my house, about 5 minutes walk away. As I'm walking I see this guy go up an alley, apparently not see something he was hoping to see, and turned around. We briefly made eye contact but there was nothing to it and he was walking really slowly. By the time I'd walked another 30 seconds down the road, I looked back as I was turning the corner and he had only just emerged back from that alley. I'm now heading down the road leading to my street and there's a guy getting into his truck with his wife. The truck is facing up the street in my direction. He flashes his headlights which I didn't quite understand, then I hear a scuff behind me. The effing guy from the alley is right behind me, like within arm's reach even though I heard nothing until he was right there. I'm pretty sure I visibly jumped upon seeing him so close, and he's walking like an absolute demon. I mumble a greeting out of pure reflex and start to cross to the other side of the road, removing my backpack in the process. He doesn't respond to my greeting or even look at me, he's just looking dead ahead like I'm not even there. He just starts running as soon as I moved. He bolts down the road and turns right into another alley, and I hear some banging on a wooden fence. As I walk past the alley about 30 seconds later I take a glance and it's empty. He must have vaulted a fence or something. Like I said, not paranormal or anything like that but it creeped me the hell out. I still don't know how that guy moves so fast to catch up to me in such a short space of time, nor how I didn't hear him. I've got pretty good hearing and he must have been sprinting to catch up to me. Weird stuff. My boyfriend and I woke up in separate parts of the house in hysterics, naked and covered in sweat. When we both finally calmed down and talked we realized we had the same dream of being surrounded by a group of black and white people with no mouths. Somewhat ironically something happened to me last night. I got home from work very early in the morning, 2:30 a.m. My house has an entryway or mudroom before you actually get into the house. I open the front door, step inside, close front door and proceed to try and find the key to get through the next door to get into my house. So the only light in this entryway is through the glass on the front door, the rest of the room is completely black and I can barely see my hands in front of my face. All of a sudden I start to hear this buzzing/vibrating noise behind me off to the right. House is old so maybe just weird house noises. Still looking for the key when I notice that the noise is getting louder, closer, and it has risen in pitch to something like of a woman was humming loudly. Maybe it's just ringing in my ear. Out of the corner of my eye I see a shadow that I thought was from light reflecting outside, move towards me creeping along the wall. That's when I noticed the vibrating noise was also getting closer to me and it seemed to be coming in the same direction as the now moving shadow. I'm crapping my pants trying to open this darn door and when I finally do the noise stops, the shadow disappears and I'm hoping it was all in my head. I was sleeping in my basement, pretty much my bedroom, and I woke up at some random time in the night for no reason. Rolled over and saw a black figure, probably around 5-10 feet and typical male physique, standing at the side of my bed. It was standing between the bed and the stairs so there was no way to nope out. I just rolled over and straight up started praying. I rolled back over and it was gone. The next morning I was in the shower, also in the basement, and the curtain was pushed to the side, not like all the way but it noticeably moved. Then when I got out of the shower my cello's D string was plucked 3 times then wrung out, which was laying against my chair in the basement. Then I went upstairs and my brother had a hand print that reached across his neck and cheek. It was too big to be his hand, but he was perfectly fine and he slept through the night uninterrupted. As a child I moved around a lot, army brat, and I insisted that every house I moved to was haunted. Nothing major ever happened, just weird noises, opening doors, things being in places that makes no sense. It wasn't until my second year at uni that I clocked on that I was haunted, not the houses, after my housemate suggested it. Anyway, last year I was on the way to my uni house from my job at a bar at about 3 a.m. To get into the house you have to walk down a privately owned alleyway. Just as I reach the entrance to this alley, a man runs up behind me and spins me around. He's clearly had a bit too much to drink and starts trying to grab me, touch me up and convince me to remove my t-shirt. Naturally, I'm very uncomfortable and scared. I remember that the window to the house had an alarm that went off if the window was hit. I figured if I could get down the alley and hit the window, my two male housemates would wake up and help. Only issue, every time I walked down the alley he'd grab me again. After maybe 5 minutes of a struggle the man hit me. Next thing you know, the alarm on the window goes off, waking up my housemates and scaring off the man. Next day the police were called. We gave them access to the CCTV footage at either end of the alley. The man was caught on tape, but, since most of the incident occurred in the alley, there was not enough evidence to charge. Later that day, my housemates and I decided to check the footage to see what caused the alarm to go off. There was nothing. No bird, cat or any other animal. The alarm just went off. This had never happened before and didn't happen any time after either. I'm convinced it was my ghost. It used to freak me out, but I'm kinda glad it's around now. In the house I grew up in, it always felt like you were being watched. I'd see shadows out of the corner of my eye and dark mist that would dissolve when you looked straight at them. My older sister was always scared of the attic, especially. She would barricade the door when we were left home alone. I went in the attic quite often to get various things. It's where we kept large toy containers, old clothes and stuffed animals, and I just liked seeing what I could find. It always felt like I was being watched, though. One time I went up there, and as I reached the top of the stairs, I saw a large, translucent alien-shaped white head looking at me from behind a box. I froze, terrified, and locked eyes with it for a few seconds before it slowly lowered itself down to hide. I turned right back around and left, telling myself I had imagined it, but scared to go in the attic for years after that. I didn't tell anyone for years. My parents eventually sold the house and we moved, and I've never felt the same way anywhere else I've lived. I used to have this reoccurring nightmare about this lizard man type monster who could see what I could see out of my eyes. So I'd run and hide and he didn't know where I was, but then as soon as I peeked to see if it was safe, he'd know where I was. So I'd have to leave that hiding spot and go find a new one, and then it would happen over and over and over again. A literal nightmare. Very Kafkaesque. But here is the real spooky part. I once mentioned the lizard man to my dad, and he got super white in the face and his voice was all shaky and he just said, "This dream took place at our house in East St. Paul? The one with the apartments right behind it?" And I said, "Yes. That's where I'd always go to hide." "How did you know that?" And he said, "Because I have the exact dream." And I dunno if it was just the way he said it or just the overall situation or both, but I still get goosebumps thinking about it. It's quite chilling. Am nurse, have all kinds of creepy as hell stories. One of the most unsettling, we had this very needy patient who was on his call light every 10 or 15 minutes for the goofiest stuff. Fluff my pillow. More ice in my water. I forgot, etc. Hell, one time he hit his call light, "We go in there," he says. I dropped my call light. Anyway, one night he died. Thing is, that mothering call light kept going off all night, every 10 or 15 minutes, while his body lay in the bed and we waited for the mortician to come get him. The very first hotel that I worked at, I started at the front desk and worked 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift. There was someone there with me from 2 p.m. 10 p.m., so I always had a little more than an hour where I was alone at the desk. Our kitchen closed at 10 p.m., so usually by 10:15 p.m., it was only the bartender and I still there. One night, it was almost 11 p.m. and there was a huge noise that came from the kitchen area. The bartender and I ran back there and saw that every single pot, pan, ladle, spoon, Everything else that was hanging from the ceiling racks were on the ground. After our shift, we watched the camera back and there was N1 in the kitchen when it happened. I have no explanation for it other than it was one of the scariest things that has ever happened to me and I could not get out of there fast enough. Did you see all of the things fall to the floor by themselves in the video? That is super scary. Reminds me of that scene in Paranormal Activity LOL. Yes. I was able to see every single item hit the floor, at the exact same time. I said the exact same thing. I looked at the bartender and told her that it reminded me of those movies. She claims to have a lot of experiences with ghosts/spirits and said that she knew there were several at the hotel, but that was the only time I was ever a witness to any of them. I was living with my now mother-in-law in a house she had just purchased a few months before. We had all had various weird feelings or experiences in the house, but two really stick out. Collectively, there were 3 dogs living in the house at the time. One evening we are all sitting with our backs to the hallway, this is significant, watching a movie. All of a sudden my German Shepherd and my Terrier both perk up their ears and start staring down the hallway behind where we are sitting. I mean, full attention. I notice and turn around, the light in the hall was off, it was dark, but of course don't see anything. 5 minutes later, they're still staring and now growling. This time my wife and I turn around and we both watch as the light switch on the wall gets flipped to on. Dogs went crazy and so did we. A few weeks later. Same scenario, light is off and we are watching a movie. My German Shepherd loved to play fetch and we always had a million balls around to entertain her. This time, she's staring down the hallway and wagging her darn tail. This time, we all notice again and start to watch. I swear to God, a ball, single orange tennis ball came rolling down the hallway towards her. We all went white. There were a few others but Jesus, I hated that hallway. It never felt like a bad energy but my feeble little brain was still scared nonetheless. Edit, one more story. My mom-in-law was having these dreams a few weeks after moving in about the house catching on fire and burning to the ground with us all inside. Horrible. About 3 weeks after these dreams we woke up one morning and distinctly smelled smoke coming from the house somewhere. Panicked, we all started searching and eventually came to the garage. On a rafter, we noticed a smoke coming out from around a fluorescent light fixture. At that moment I realized, my God, it's attached directly to this old dried out beam. The light was left on all night and it was clearly burning the rafter ever so slightly. Lights are not supposed to be secured/screwed onto a rafter like that. So we like to think our ghost hosts were looking out for all of us. After that, her dreams stopped. Thanks Ghosty. This one isn't the worst, but it's always left me with a bad feeling thinking back to it. I used to live out in the country, way back almost to the end of a long dead-end road. There were only 2 houses that were actually lived in that far down, my dad's and the old lady at the very end of the road. There's my dad's house, and around it kind of off to the side were a bunch of old medium-sized barns/sheds. I used to let my cat out sometimes and she would roam around the yard, and come back up and paw at my window when she was ready to come in. One night I had done just that, but after a long while I got a little concerned. She usually only stayed out for an hour or 2 tops, but it had been way longer. I decided to go out and get her. I go out through the side door on the house and immediately felt off, like something was there. I needed to get my cat though, and if something was there I chalked it up to a raccoon or other critter. I grabbed the mag light and set off for the barns, calling for my cat. I found her huddled up in one of the barns, and she did not want to leave. It was like she was terrified of something, and was very stiff when I picked her up. I haven't taken but 2 or 3 steps when this light shoots across the sky directly over me, illuminating everything almost like lightning. It made this odd woo-woom sound as it passed. My cat freaked out and started growling and clawing at me, which she never does. I actually dropped her because of it, and she took off towards the house as though she were running for her life. I did the same. I've never figured out what that was. I've read about comets and things like that, but nothing says anything about the odd noise I heard, or the reaction my cat had. It could have been something simple and explainable, but man did it freak me out at the time. For the longest time, I thought I was haunted. Every day, every time I was alone, I'd hear something. It started out pretty innocuous, a few footsteps nearby or a slight rustling of leaves. But as time went on, it got more intense. The footsteps got louder, Closer, to the point where I could feel someone on my heels. Bushes that used to lightly rustle 20 feet away were perfectly still until I was inches from them, at which point they'd violently shake like someone was jumping out of them. Naturally, this was freaking me the hell out, but then something changed. One day, I woke up to find a note slipped under my bedroom door. "Can we be friends?" At this time I lived alone, and you couldn't get to the outside of my bedroom without having keys for both the apartment complex and my unit. Nobody besides myself and my landlord had those keys. Not really knowing what else to do, I grabbed a pen and wrote back okay. From then on, I didn't hear the footsteps anymore. No more rustling of leaves, either. But every now and then, I'd be thinking though something or talking to myself in my head, and I'd hear this wonderfully sweet little giggle. It never surprised me, and it never felt wrong to hear. Honestly, it kinda felt like when you'd make your crush giggle, there was the same warmth and satisfaction. Whoever this ghost was, we were friends. Over the next several months we became better friends, actually talked, and eventually started to see her. Supernatural, right? No, turns out I'm just mildly schizophrenic. Take care of your mental health, y'all.